You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it is America's talk radio show about opera. It is Opera Box Score. I'm George Cedarquist, joined by Matt Cummings, Weston Williams, Ashley Hardgrave. All right, this week, our team is down with Olympic fever. We'll break down the best of the operatic performances in the Paris Opening Ceremonies, as well as iconic past showings from previous Olympiads. Yeah, that's right. We're taking it way back to Barcelona. Plus, 2-minute drill. Well, he may have been the one to throw the punch, but it looks like John Eliot Gardner is the one whose career's down for the count. Who wrote that? Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify. Click follow, Apple Podcasts, hit the plus sign. That was brutal. Send us a voice memo or email us your hot takes. Mailbag, operaboxscore.com is the email address. You can even just record your thoughts. It's the You Got Something to Say tab on the website, operaboxscore.com. Hey, however you contribute, you're going to get the OBS beer coaster, OBS lapel pin, #1 OBS fan foam finger, just for sharing your own hot take. We have lots of hot takes. This is going to be a really great show. Oliver Camacho on a much-earned vacation out in Santa Fe, catching some opera.
Is he there?
I certainly hope so.
As we speak.
Allegedly. If you are listening from Santa Fe, send us a message and let us know, is Oliver there?
I'm sure you've heard him.
That's Matt Cummings. He's on the show this week.
I am. I'm happy to see you all, but to be honest, I'm just counting down the minutes until I get to watch Simone Biles again.
Oh my God.
She's back, baby. The qualifying rounds were so amazing.
They were so good. I will be up at 2 this next morning to watch this happen.
That's Ashley Hardgrave.
Listen, my only instructions from here on out for America, listen to me good. Protect Flava Flav at all costs. His care, support, and love and the sponsorship of the women's water polo team is so sweet and inspirational. Please tell me you guys saw the clip of him hugging it out with Jill Biden in one of their matches.
I did see that.
Oh, my Lord.
I don't know what part of the Matrix we're in, but this is a timeline I'm enjoying, and this is where we need to stay. Also, Snoop Dogg can stay as well. Snoop can stay for everything.
I hope that clock can float, you know?
That's Weston Williams.
Yeah. Let the record show that, George does not read the opening script before he starts the episode, but I think that adds a certain level of spontaneity to it, which I find charming.
I'm nothing if not spontaneous. Let's talk some opera.
And now, where the histories of music and sports collide. Boom! Sporzando!
The opening ceremonies are in the books for the Paris 2024 Olympics. I actually managed to watch them in real time.
Wow.
Real time or prime time? Real time?
No, like literally 12:30 Central on a Friday afternoon. I was there sorting some receipts for the household and watching the opening ceremonies.
Drink?
We're going to talk you through all the musical aspects of them in this segment. There was a lot. This was a opera-heavy Olympics, and with good reason.
I would say so. This was a unique opening ceremony for a lot of reasons. First of all, I will say I was not lucky enough to see it live, so I was reduced to trawling the internet with a giant net trying to find clips of Jakub Józef Orlinski, which are not there.
With NBC Universal following behind you, smacking your hand.
I did manage to get some sort of sense of how it all went down musically as well as theatrically. A lot of interesting musicians I was not expecting. You know, Lady Gaga, notably non-French singer there.
La Dame Gaga, as
La
we will be
Dame
referring
Gaga.
Right. Singing Mon Truc en Plume by Gigi Jean-Marie.
They got a little bit of a Les Mis in there. I think the first appearance of an opera singer, at least as far as I could piece together, was the Marina Viotti plus Gojira plus Carmen mashup. Gojira, of course, being the metal band with all the flames, which made me nervous from a architecture sort of preservation standpoint shooting out. That one, I think, was the first moment that I think got the announcers to like acknowledge that operatic things were happening, because there had been like, classical music playing in the background. There was a lot of Dukas, some Saint-Saëns, but like, you can't really ignore the electric guitars and the flames spurting in your face. A lot of other singers, Aya Nakamura, Rimkei. We had Axel Saint-Cyril singing the national anthem while standing on the roof of the Grand Palais.
That was just so gorgeous. I cannot tell you.
Absolutely perfect. One of the only times where a full park and bark is absolutely justified.
Well,
it's just
no
so
other
majestic.
She's in that gigantic gown. She's holding the big French flag, which is somehow also part of the gown. And she's just
which I like to think
fierce.
is maybe a reference to Jesse Norman singing it at the centennial of of the current republic, where she is just draped in the tricolore in the most French ensemble that you can imagine.
So French. And then, of course, there was the famous lost clip, at least on this side of copyright protections, the Jakub Josef Orlinski performance, where I believe they did show a little bit of him breakdancing live, but the rumor is they did not show him singing. He was singing something from Les Engalantes by Jean-Philippe Rameau. I don't know what, because no one on the internet will tell me. And I think the only people who can watch that performance are physically in Poland. So once again, let us know if you know what he's
Polish
saying.
friends of the show, if you have a VPN hookup.
Look, here's the thing about Jakub Josef Orlinski. All right, so first of all, friend of the show, and I had to giggle when I was like, that guy's been on our podcast. That's incredible. So he was dressed in a cross between a sort of like Elizabethan ruff and codpiece, but with like Adidas stripes running down the side. Utterly gorgeous. And
it was the motto of sportivité, the mascot,
and of course,
I mean.
exactly. And of course, that he's our guy who can like break dance, which is an Olympic sport this year, and is a phenomenal operatic countertenor. Initially, he was singing when I was watching. It almost felt like he was lip syncing, which I don't know if that was the case, to his own track, of course. And he was busting a couple, breakdancing moves. He looked a little lost. I'm going to be honest. And
well, here's the thing. What I was able to get was I was able to go on his Instagram page, and he did describe the rehearsal process. First and foremost, they only had one rehearsal in place before doing the whole thing. And I assume he was not the only one who was given just one rehearsal. And of course,
nobody had it.
And the second part of that, of course, being it was raining and it was outside and it was in the least controlled environment possible, because this was not a typical Olympic opening ceremony where you're in a nice little arena.
It wasn't a stadium.
No, you were out there in the elements, which was truly kind of like genuinely exciting in a way that I don't think I've felt that much excitement for an opening ceremony since the Beijing Olympics, at least.
Which that was like a spectacle to end all spectacles.
Yes, but even that was contained and controlled in a way that this was not. It reminded me of a 1922 performance of Symphony of Sirens in Baku in the early Soviet Union.
Oh,
do you know about this? So this was a citywide composition by I think the composer's name was Aramov or something like that. I can check it later, but they wanted to put together this big sort of it was in the early days of the Soviet Union before pressures came down on excesses and sort of squashing creativity. But they literally had multiple choirs. Ship guns were the percussion section. They installed these massive sort of instruments that were powered by steam engines that would go by on various cues. Just a huge citywide sort of phenomenon. And that was the sort of precedent in my mind for what happened at this opening ceremony.
You call it a precedent, right? There really was no precedent for this. Yeah. So the idea that you would actually move the athletes through the city of Paris on the Seine in the famous bateau mouche was utterly genius, and that integrated into that along the river would be these moments of, let's call it performance art, let's call it pop-up art,
which we've only named like a third of the performances that happened.
Yeah. And again, without forgetting all of the operatic tie-ins, right? So we've got Bizet, we got Offenbach, obviously there was going to be a can-can, we had great opera singers singing.
There were
Speaking of no rehearsal.
Yeah. Exactly. But the logistics alone, my directorial brain kind of exploded, and I started crying when I realized, like, how would you even...
Because it also had to be televised, you know?
Right, and you can see that the rain threw them a little bit for the loop because there were no shots planned for, like, people to do lens wipes.
Exactly.
So you are watching through water drops at points, but, like, who cares? When you're watching when you're watching a live high wire act on that many different dimensions from that many different people, and like it went off more or less without a hitch. Like, if the worst thing that you could say is that there are water drops on the camera lenses,
that's
like
inconsequential, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, and then you've got like the light is fading across the city of Paris, so the whole thing is timed out. So when we get to the end, and we will get to the end later on the show, it's dark and light is doing its thing. They
had to really consult the Farmer's Almanac in terms of sort of like sunset and how this sort of stuff already worked out. I mean, and when you think about just again, I'll continue on your director brain, if you talk to our buddy Thomas Joly, the director of this, who by the way did a production at Paris Opera in 2016.
Yep.
The elements all coming together, and so much of this, your stage was outdoors and in a hyper online, a terminally online world. There is no way to rehearse this thing start to finish without there being spoilers. And the Olympics are such a, like, they're all about the element of surprise when it comes to that opening ceremony. And so it just adds again to sort of the complicated execution of pulling something like this off, where you've got 80 some odd boats coming down the Seine. You've got all of these different performance artists that clearly didn't have time to have rehearsals. Again, we go back to the can-can. But also, you've got these different elements that are part of the architecture of the bridges, like turning an entire bridge into a bacchanal and a catwalk. By the way, it wasn't the Last Supper. More on that later. But yeah, it was just so fascinating to see all of those different elements come together. And there were also a couple of like stats in sort of Olympic history and sort of history of France that are a part of this. Is, one of them is, our friends at Gojira, who did the amazing clip that we're going to hear some of at some point during this recording. That was the first metal band to ever be heard in an Olympics opening ceremony.
You talked about a complicated execution and architecture. I mean, you've got Marie Antoinette holding her own head in the prison where she awaited her execution.
Artistically, this was such a operatic Regie Theater mentality to on a scale I've never seen, before. I don't think a lot of the normies out there were not expecting. I could hear a lot of the American announcers being kind of thrown for a loop by everything.
You think Kelly Clarkson doesn't know about Sariba?
Puerto Rico. Poor Peyton. He was white-knuckling it.
Peyton was white-knuckling it on NBC. Kelly Clarkson literally did not contribute a single thing of interest to the entire broadcast. And Tarico, because he's
come back
until the end.
We will come back to that, George.
So first thing we're going to do is hear a little bit of our nice Carmen mashup with the bravest singer, well, second bravest singer I know, because we'll see the first one in a second, Marina Viotti, doing her thing with Gojira.
Wow. The Paris Olympics, obviously opera kind of at the center of that whole experience. Matt, let's take it back to Barcelona, which I think was the most operatic opening ceremony prior to this one. But why?
So when you talk about Barcelona, there is a very storied history of like many, many extremely famous opera singers from the 20th century coming from there. So you have Montserrat Caballé was from there, Alfredo Kraus was from there, Giacomo Aragal was from there. And then from Madrid, you also throw in who we're not going to pronounce his name for real, and Teresa Berganza. But so they put together just like an operatic spectacular. When you think of Barcelona and Caballé, of course, the first thing that comes to mind is the song that she did with Freddie Mercury, of Barcelona, which was that was the soundtrack to the opening credits of the ceremony, like through a crawl through the city. Unfortunately, Freddie Mercury had died a couple months prior to the ceremony, so they were not able to perform it live. But that tribute did still happen from their song that they'd recorded 5 years prior. Then you get to the actual stadium. This is in 1992. So, like a lot of the seeds for this Paris Olympic ceremonies, like the drama of it happening at dusk, like Barcelona was the first city that had that. The absolute, like really Meyerbeerian pageantry of like depicting national disasters. Like there's this whole clip that you should all check out of like the Pillars of Hercules, where the whole floor of the stadium is like a giant ship in the Mediterranean Sea. But so like around all of this, you have Montserrat Caballé and Jose Carreras serenading everyone during the entry to the parade while there's dancing going on, of course. Then we move on to Domingo, who sings a little song from a zarzuela that then segues into a flamenco dance that then segues back to Alfredo Kraus singing an Obrador's art song, Del Cabello Más Sutil. Then there's about 2 hours that go by. And we pick it back up by the time we get to the entry of the torch and the Olympic flag with none other than my favorite Greek mezzo-soprano who sounds like she might burst into flames at all times, Agnes Balza, singing a song called Hellenism, while the torch and the flag are being run around the stadium. Only the torch goes up in flames, which at Barcelona was famously done by like an archer shooting an arrow into the cauldron.
It was the coolest thing ever.
Like we were heavy on drama here. Then Alfredo Kraus sang Alfredo Kraus sang the Olympic anthem while they raised the flag. Then there was a short choral excerpt of the Andrew Lloyd Webber big hit Amigos para Siempre.
Amigos para Siempre, of
which
course.
you heard
Amigos.
on every Andrew Lloyd Webber greatest hits album till the end of time. The full song was from the closing ceremonies, where it was performed by, again, Jose Carreras, and at the peak of her powers, Sarah Brightman, only 5 years Alpha Phantom. They might have even still been married at that point. I think they probably were.
Jesus.
And then, if that weren't enough, the opening ceremonies closes with a 17-minute mini aria recital with excerpts from Libiamo, the Hoffman Barcarolle, Quando men vo, the Flower Aria, Di Provenza e Mar, the Rigoletto Quartet, Vesti la Giubba, e Lucevan le Stelle, Una voce poco fa, Casta Diva, Lago a Factorum, the Toreador song, Habanero, La Donna Immobile, Di Quella Pira, Ritorno Vincitore, and then they all sing Ode to Joy with a child. And when I say they, that's Cabe e Carreras, Domingo, Giacomo Aragal, Teresa Berganza, and Juan Pons.
I'm so full right now. I can't even tell you.
Talk about a night at the opera. Marx Brothers, move over.
Jeez.
What's cool about this, and I mentioned this before we started recording, is that, like, you know, both France and Spain have these, like, really solidified positions in the operatic zeitgeist. And then speaking of zeitgeist, the Olympics are often, you know, as much as they're a celebration and a reflection of the culture of the host country, they're often a celebration and a reflection of sort of where we are in the global timeline of things. So to have this be so operatically heavy in 1992 makes a lot of sense, because this stuff was still way more a part, I think, of European culture and lifestyle even than it is now. Yeah. And then to see things be very cross-genre, cross-cultural, very inclusive, all about the we and the collective, but also talking about our history for Paris in 2024. I thought that was a really appropriate choice. And I mean, frankly, it's the stuff that we always, you know, at least me, bark about over here. It's like, all this music should come together. This music should be for everybody. We should find ways to introduce it to different audiences. Well, good job, Thomas Joly, because you absolutely introduced lots of opera to a bunch of new eyeballs.
Other Olympics, like the Winter Olympics, of course, Pav, his final public performance was in Turin, and he died the following year.
That was in 2006, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Misha Burgers-Gozman also made a pretty big splash in Vancouver when she performed the Olympic hymn for Vancouver.
I'm very excited for the next Italian Winter Olympics, because we're going to do another eyeballs deep dive into the musical history of the Winter Olympics opening ceremonies.
Maybe those orchestral members won't be as covered with snow as these were covered by rain.
Oh, those poor pianos.
So many wet instruments.
Did you see the string section of the orchestra stressed me out? God.
Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is why I prepare for weather, you know. I think the position of opera in the Olympics has always been so interesting to me, because it sneaks in more than you'd expect. I think I see like one thing happen operatically at least per Olympics opening ceremony or closing ceremony.
Like when Sarah Brightman came back to the Beijing Olympics.
Exactly.
She's everywhere.
But obviously, you know, we are Opera Box Score. We love it when it's a little bit more of a focus, like with Barcelona and Paris. But it is nice to have all of this, the jocks out there see what we're doing over here at Opera Box Score.
Let us know what you think the highlights were for Paris as well. You can just email us operaboxscore@gmail.com. A couple more thoughts to give going back to Paris. And Ashley, I want to go back to you with what was the grand finale of the Paris opening ceremonies.
I mean, frankly, nothing matters before, after, during, or since, except for the full closing of the opening ceremonies, which is, Weston, I'm going to need you to get your beep ready, because we're going to talk about it, and that's Celine Dion. As we all know, she came, and there had been rumors of a possible sort of comeback. She's been going through an extraordinary series of health circumstances and ailments and complications. She's been diagnosed with a really complicated, mysterious disease called stiff person syndrome. She closed her residency. She has not been performing. She's not been singing at all. She basically had to go to physical therapy.
It recently came out that she's been, you know, suffering from those symptoms for way, 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 way longer than anyone had any idea.
Significantly longer. She basically had to learn how to, you know, proverbially walk again when it came to actually using her chords and phonating. So the fact that she closed out this big, gigantic ceremony standing in the gosh darned middle of the Eiffel Tower, singing Hymne à l'Amour. It was
probably the best performance I've heard from her, you know, even. Like, it was... I you know, not to be, you know, get Matt and Ashley too angry at me, but like Celine Dion has never been like a top singer for me, but man, she absolutely nailed it. Like, I got chills, you know, at the very end in ways I was not expecting.
I mean, you could just see the determination in her eyes that she was not going to let anything get between her and the end of that song.
Yeah.
Which the song itself is like such an overpowering, like, well of emotion, since it, like, going all the way back to its history as an Edith Piaf, like, torch song, because it's about her husband dying in a plane crash.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot to unpack here.
Nous aurons pour nous l'éternité dans le bleu de toute l'immensité, dans le ciel, plus de problème. Mon amour, crois-tu penser?
I mean, from a straight vocal technique standpoint, what I love about what you just said, Weston, is like, you know, even for someone who's not necessarily like a fan of or super familiar, or maybe even doesn't care too much for her work, the fact that it was such a powerful performance, not just to watch, but to listen to, that's one thing. For people who are a little bit further in depth when it comes to knowledge of her recordings and her technique,
through the looking glass.
A little further down, Matt's going to back me up here in a second.
In the 90s diva culture would be one way to put
it. Hairline deep. Here's what I loved about it is that, like, if you're familiar with those things, she's had this like freakish voice with chords of steel and resonance that comes from places I've never understood. Forget you, Rolling Stone, for not including her in the top 200 voices of all time. I'm still not forgiving you
mad
for that.
about it.
But
Taylor Swift is on there.
Stop. I can't. She's songwriters. Yes, we'll talk about it. But so to be familiar with her recordings from the 80s, 90s, and today, and understanding sort of the elasticity of what that voice sounded like, and then to hear this that had more, and I mean all of this in the most positive and wonderful and supportive ways, the grit, the determination. There was a maturity. There was you could tell this voice was older. And I think a lot of times we talk about singers and them sounding older. Sometimes it can feel like a bad thing. I think it's a beautiful and incredible thing, given what we know about her and her trajectory.
And it still sounded like her. Like, it was still very clearly the same voice. It was still, and like, it was not that low of a key. Like, those high notes are C's, which, I mean, in her heyday, like, she had another half an octave at least above that, like, very, very comfortably. But, like, C's always been, like, a big money note for belters, and she's like, I still got it. I'm still Celine Dion. And, I think what's really interesting about her is, like, first of all, as Americans, we only really know, like, the latter 2/3 of her career.
Yeah, Power of Love forward, yeah.
But that is not true of the Parisian audiences, because she was, like, a French-Canadian pop superstar in her pre-teens, honestly, not even teens. She was like a child star who was one of the first Francophone artists to make it big internationally. And the French are hugely, like, not possessive of her, protective of her.
Protective.
And the Parisians in particular, like, she had 3 really, really big concerts in Paris in the 90s that they made into live albums, and those, like, rocketed to #1 at the charts and sold hundreds of thousands, if not millions of copies. So, like, there is an even deeper history when you talk about, like, the Paris of it all here. And Celine, it's not even her first Olympics.
It certainly isn't. One of the things that really sort of brought her onto the scene is right after that sort of Power of Love, the Falling Into You era that we mentioned, that was in 1994. In 1996, the Olympics were in Atlanta, and she was brought in sort of as like the fresh-faced voice of the moment.
You know, Whitney Houston had done it in Soul in 1988, and then
Exactly.
Sarah Brightman had done it in 92, and now like a new diva comes onto the stage.
Right. And so it was just that sort of introduction to the full global stage, but also like, this is our person right now. This is our like it girl of the moment.
Yeah.
And so to see her with the fabulous poofed short bob hair and her little tiny baby tee and her big cargo pants when they were interviewing her for singing, "Oh, I'm so nervous, but I'm so excited." Like she was like bubbly and young and effervescent and sweet. So, but to see this return from 96 to now, and to see her come out with like the sleek slicked back bun, the elegant, like
the
full
custom Dior
coverage,
gown.
Dior. Pretty much everything was either Dior or Louis Vuitton in terms of like the costuming that came through in this. But to see her close it out in like one of the more dramatic Dior pieces, like everything about this was. I'm not going to lie to you. I was in a full sob. I couldn't even sit on my couch while I was laying on my floor because I was so overcome with emotion. Everything about the moment was just so beautiful. I mean, Celine Dion is an opera in and of herself. Like her life story, the things that she's gone through, like the
tragedy of all the deaths in her family in the last decade. Like, so to be singing a song that's like that intensely emotional about loss, like not just this loss of her identity, her professional identity, and like it goes way deeper than just profession with her. Like it is her passion. And this is like the main thing that I think, as a longtime Celine truther, it is really wonderful to kind of see a lot of like public opinion catching up to where she's always been. Because like in the 90s, she was this big goofball who sang over the top power ballads, and like if you go back and read reviews of like the albums as they came out, there's always some mention about like how great her vocals are, but they just like couldn't stand. Critics couldn't stand what she was putting out there. They thought it was dreck. They thought it was like not worthy of her talents, basically. And like 20 years later now, like this is who she's always been. She is like an intensely goofy woman who takes her art very, very seriously, but not herself. And she loves to sing and like believes that a voice can like express these emotions truer than any like words or any other kind of like production really can. And that these emotions are so big that just like singing is the only way to let them out. And so while she was very like successful in the 90s, while she even was like beloved by many people, I wouldn't say that she always got the respect that she deserved as an artist. And like now like the rest of us are kind of coming around to where she has always been.
Well, and I also think that we appreciate kook a little more now than we used to. I mean, if you think about like the grand pop, both on both sides of the spectrum, when it comes to the opera world and when it comes to the popular music world, when we're looking at like the divas, the chanteuses, it was kind of a shut up and sing culture for a long time. On the pop side, if you look at, your Whitneys, your Mariahs, when they were really in their major element, the height of their success, we didn't really hear from them as people. We only heard their voice. And so I think the kook that Celine Dion would bring to that was part of exactly what Matt's talking about her maybe not getting the respect, maybe not being listened to or revered as much. I think the same thing is true on the opera side. It's like at the time, we didn't really celebrate a lot of people that had these opinions. I mean, we do now in the real world. And like the more outspoken an opera singer is now, especially on, civic causes or political things, we're like, heck yes, we want to talk more about that. But again, we didn't used to do that, just to sort of bring it back into sort of classical and pop and how they, cycle together more than we might think. But yeah, that's one of the things that was so special. The Olympics are all about this celebration of the collective, the triumph of the human spirit, the absolute limits that, these machines of human bodies can go through. And like, what better way to close out one of those celebratory opening ceremonies than to have somebody who has really put her body through a series of challenges and tests. And then this was her like redemption moment. It was, I could cry again right now. Someone talk.
It was the story of opera, and it was the competitiveness and the resilience of the athlete put into one woman in one moment, which was stunning. as we look ahead to Los Angeles in 2028, obviously Paris is going to be a hard act to follow in terms of the opening ceremonies. If I turn it over to you three for a prediction for the opening ceremonies for 2028 in Los Angeles, I assume it's happening in the LA Coliseum in downtown LA, but hey, all bets are off at this point. What's one thing that is going to happen in the opening ceremonies in 4 years' time in Los Angeles?
I have a prediction. So, as the only thing I know about past Olympic performances is whatever Philip Glass was doing at the time. And the official music of the 23rd Olympics, games in 1984 in Los Angeles once again was, a piece by, Philip Glass, the Olympian. It's a very Philip Glassy piece written at the height of his success. So I predict one of three things will happen. If Philip Glass is still around by the time these games roll around, he will compose another very similar sounding piece. Second possibility is that he will not be around and they will play that exact same piece, no changes. Third scenario, he may or may not be around, but doesn't want to be involved, and they will play the exact same piece, but add a bunch of unnecessary percussion and choir elements like they did to the Universal theme. There, I said it. And it's going to be absolute garbage. But one of those three things will happen, guaranteed.
Ashley or Matt, what do you got?
I think there's going to be at least one ad about the Ozempics, and that Tom Cruise is going to deliver the torch to the cauldron in a fighter jet.
On the heels of a progressive federal administration with deeply increased arts funding nationwide, LA will take a note out of France's book and say, let's go ahead and take this outside. And they will jet between some of the major things in the greater southern Los Angeles area, all the way from the La Brea tar pits to the Hollywood sign, off of which lasers will be shot. And it will all culminate with a youth orchestra from Compton playing the new Philip Glass Olympic thing, while cross-culturally we have friend of the show, Alexander Neef, conducting an orchestra of AI-fueled musicians.
I can't wait to see it.
Well, if any of those things are true, you know, we were there first, and we were there like light years before anyone else. If you have an opinion on the opening ceremonies for this Olympics or the past or the future, just let us know. operaboxscore@gmail.com.
This just in. The 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
Sir John Eliot Gardner will step down as leader and artistic director of the Monteverdi Choir and Orchestras after hitting as singer last season. The conductor previously withdrew from engagements, including a BBC Proms, after the incident, and said he was seeking specialist help. Gardner said in a statement that he, quote, apologizes repeatedly and unreservedly for losing control in such an inappropriate fashion, and agreed to leave the organization that he himself founded in 1964.
The BBC Cardiff Singer of the World competition has postponed its next iteration until 2027, since St. David's Hall, where the contest takes place, remains closed after an inspection last year found that the roof could collapse. The competition will instead stage a gala concert in October 2025, but presumably in a different building.
British baritone Thomas Allen has announced his retirement following a performance of The Merry Widow at Glyndebourne. The 79-year-old told the crowd that he was, quote, hanging up his dance shoes, and that performance had been his last.
The University of Cape Town Opera in South Africa is set to present the world premiere staging of Donizetti's, quote, lost opera Delinda. It's the first time in history that this opera is going to be performed in full. It was discovered in 2019 and then meticulously reconstructed.
Orchestra members of Welsh National Opera have voted overwhelmingly in favor of a strike, following management's plans to cut pay by 15% and make the orchestra jobs part-time. 81.25% of the musicians' union members who responded voted yes to a full strike action, and 96.87% would have been okay with any action up to a strike. A survey conducted earlier this year noted that over 60% of the orchestra would consider leaving if WNO went part-time.
Opera America announced its 2024 Discovery Grants from its Opera Grants for Women Composers program, totaling $100,000. Congratulations are in order for Jasmine Ariel Barnes for She Who Dared, for Sivan Eldar for Nine Jeweled Deer, Whitney George for No Man's Land, Rebecca Gray for Bus Opera, Elizabeth Hoffman for On Circe, Sultana Isham for Rogue Objects, and congratulations also go to Dina Maccabee for Roses Are Blue.
The Bayerische Staatsoper has named baritone Gerald Finley Kammersänger following a performance of Parsifal earlier this month. We are proud and happy that Gerald Finley has been closely associated with the Bayerische Staatsoper for many years, the company said. He will continue to be a regular guest in the future.
The Venice Film Festival has announced that Maria, the Maria Callas biopic by Pablo Larraín, will premiere this September. The film stars Angelina Jolie as the famed diva in her final days in, yes, Paris. Oh, can we add this to that Callas 100 list?
Yes, George. Yes, we can. This award may be major. The Music Critics Association of North America has announced that 10 Days in a Madhouse was named the best new opera for 2024. The opera, composed by Renee Orth and featuring a libretto by Hannah Moscovich, was commissioned by Friends of the Show, Opera Philadelphia, and Tapestry Opera.
Exit stage right, British baritone Benjamin Luxon has died at age 87. One of Great Britain's major singers, Luxon began his career in Benjamin Britten's English opera group and premiered the role of Owen Wingrave for the composer. He went on to have an international career performing at Royal Opera House, Glyndebourne, La Scala, Vienna, and the Metropolitan Opera.
Scottish baritone Alan Watt has died. Watt also had an international career in opera and concert work before his long tenure as a faculty member of the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama.
Italian soprano Elena Mauti Nunziata has died at 77. She made a name for herself in the Italian repertoire, breaking onto the international scene in 1977 as Violetta in Madrid. Mauti Nunziata went on to perform at La Scala, Covent Garden, the Paris Opera, and in a number of performances at the Met.
And on this day, July 29th, a couple of first premieres for you. 1786 brought us the first performance of Lucille Grétry's Le Mariage d'Antonio in Paris. 1802 was the first performance of Étienne Nicolas Méhul's Les Trésors Supposés ou Les Dangers d'Écouter au Porter, also in Paris. 1818 brought us the first performance of Michele Carafa's Berenice in Syria in Naples. Now we've got some birth anniversaries for you. 1646 brought us the birth of German composer and teacher Johann Thiele. 1865, birth of composer Nicola Spinelli. 1874 was the birth of Italian tenor Amadeo Bassi. 1886 brought us the birth of baritone Apollo Granforte. He created Minicrate in Neroni by Mascagni. 1887 has two birth anniversaries here. German composer Rudi Stepan and Hungarian-born American operetta composer, the few, the proud, your friend and mine, Sigmund Romberg. 1899 brought us the birth of Austrian bass Ludwig Weber. He created Holsteiner in Freudenstag by Strauss. 1927 was the birth of German conductor and composer Michael Gielen. 1935 was the birth of German tenor and conductor Peter Schreier. It's like they knew my German is super bad, so they all were born on this day. And finally, we have some happy birthdays. Happy birthday on this day in 1942 to Austrian baritone Bernd Weichel. 1943, happy birthday to Polish composer Marta Zazinska. And finally, happy birthday in 1963 on this day to Russian mezzo-soprano Olga Borodina.
That is your 2-minute drill.
sticking with the Paris theme for tonight, that was Olga Borodina singing Mon cœur souffre à ta voix from Sanson et Dalila. Saint-Saëns did get some love in the opening ceremonies with Danse Macabre, which was rudely cut off before the ending by the Minions. But not this recording, which also features the London Symphony Orchestra and Colin Davis.
People get out of this business in all sorts of strange ways. The way that Sir John Eliot Gardner was defenestrated, shall we say, it has to be one of the most bizarre things, right? So this is...
I feel like defenestrated implies that it wasn't his fault.
He really defenestrated himself, I think.
I'm not trying to excuse it. Obviously, like, don't hit people. I think it's so strange to think of a sort of old Englishman, like, losing control and hitting somebody and quite necessarily being shown the door.
I am delighted that we are finally holding our elder statesmen to the same set of behavioral standards that we require of
our kindergartners,
toddlers
yes.
and 3-year-olds in preschool. So, mazel to us all for really doing that.
Yeah, I think the only sort of unusual thing here is the impact of the Monteverdi Choir and Orchestra and, John Eliot Gardner's impact on early music performance in general is singularly significant, which made it, all the more baffling that when this actually happened, that it actually happened. I certainly hope that, this is... It seems the way the stories around this seem to be phrased, it seems like it was his decision to simply leave this position forever. And if so, like character growth, which
the board definitely agreed that he should be leaving.
Absolutely.
At least they agreed.
Yeah, but I think this is this is a case where the crime is so strange and
That's
unexpected, that it really does feel like, yes, the right thing to do is step down. Your career is just over. And you had a significant place in the world of music, but the right call is to step down and not pull a Placido Domingo and simply continue your career in places where you can get away with it.
And hope that no one mentions it.
Exactly.
Gosh, those Arts Council England's cuts continue. Next thing you know is that WNO or not Welsh National Opera, the Cardiff Singer of the World competition is like the roof's falling in. Of course, the competition is every 2 years, so to say that it's postponed until 2027 is just saying like we're not doing the one.
They're skipping 1 year.
They're skipping
yeah,
exactly. They're skipping a competition.
Meanwhile, Welsh National Opera is just going to skip paying its orchestra.
Yikes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously connected to Arts Council England. I do think that, in general, in cases like this, there is more money available than management claims as a general rule. I think that it is good to fight this, even if there is not, because this is going to become more and more the new normal if these cuts, really solidify and become permanent. I think one of the problems we have had here in the US is that maybe some people slid into the defunding of the arts a little bit too comfortably and easily, and now we reap the benefits every single day. So best of luck to them.
Yeah.
Have a good strike.
Yeah, good luck. So this Donizetti opera, Donizetti, not one of my favorite composers, but this is quite unique. I mean,
Oliver
how
and I
often
will have your head for that.
do we find a so-called new opera? And originally, did people not think it was? They thought it was.
They thought it might have just been another draft of Lucrezia Borgia, because I guess there is
because
a
that's
decent
what we all want is another draft of Lucrezia Borgia.
Yeah, more of that.
Okay, Lucrezia Borgia's a banger. Some people need to sit down and check themselves.
No, this is incredibly cool, and to have it be with a university, to be with a school, I think that's even cooler.
Yeah. I fantasize. I think I've said this before about going to an antique store and finding a lost copy of Monteverdi's L'Arianna. It will definitely not happen, but every time we resurrect an opera like this, I just get all giggy inside.
The Liszt opera that they found a couple years ago.
Yeah.
But I know you know.
Thomas Allen,
One of the best to ever do it. Just
really,
this
really
is
one of the best.
It's the end of an era. He's going out on a high note, hanging up his dancing shoes. I just want to call out 2 recordings that he's on that are among my absolute favorite opera recordings of all time. One came up a couple weeks ago, actually, what is the Schulte Marriage of Figaro, where he plays the Count and is quite possibly the best recorded Count in the repertoire. And there are many, many, many people who have recorded the Count and many, many great singers.
Well, yeah.
But Thomas Allen is maybe my favorite. And I also am a big fan of the Barber of Seville that he did with Neville Mariner. And that's with
I don't know that one.
Francisco Ariza and Agnes Balza. Second Balza mention of the episode.
Yes, coming through. Yes.
It's a good one.
It makes sense that he would kind of end the career at Glyndebourne. What a great English opera house to wrap things up at. But The Merry Widow is such an interesting choice of repertoire, right? So, I assume he was playing Danilo, and so you've got some songs great, but it's the dialogues in that show. Like, you've got to have a really strong sense of acting, a good, strong sense of humor to pull off that part. What a great way to, as he said, quote, hang up his dancing shoes on.
You know who doesn't need a sense of humor? Anybody playing Maria Callas in their next film. Boom, transition.
I swear our transitions get better every single time.
Now, didn't Pablo Larraín also do the film about Lady Diana?
I want to say yes.
Spencer, didn't he? I have a feeling that what this guy does is like he makes films about all these sort of isolated individual female characters.
He did do Spencer. You're correct.
Okay.
Wow. And Oliver wasn't here to see that.
Well, he'll hear it. He'll hear it in the recording.
Now name 5-handle opera.
He also did Jackie, the Natalie Portman Jackie movie.
Thank you. Exactly.
Nice.
Quickly, let's wrap this show up.
Good call. Bad call. On Opera Box Score.
Oh my goodness. I can't believe I actually knew something about the American cinema.
So proud.
It's wild.
A momentous day.
That's not my good call, by the way. Oliver's good call, of course, is he's on vacation in Santa Fe. Much deserved, much earned rest. I hope he's seeing some great shows. We're going to kick it over to Matt Cummings.
I mean, I am just going to be mainlining gymnastics until someone needs me. And even if they need me, more gymnastics.
Weston Williams.
I have a bad call, and that's the Seine River in Paris. They had to pause the training for the triathlon because, like I said, it is still too dirty to swim in, and things are getting hairy because, I don't know if you know this, but the Olympics have already started.
Ashley Hardgrave.
I mentioned earlier that I'm really into sort of the human interest stories that come as part of the Olympics. And one of the ways in which we've really seen that play out in this one more than others in recent memory are in the social media stars that are coming out of this. There's a Norwegian swimmer who's like obsessed with these chocolate chip muffins in the food court in the Olympic Village. And so it's all of these different like shots of him like professing his love for that, like laying in bed with like the chocolate muffin. It's so great. But the Americans are really, really going for it. And my personal favorite at the moment, you should all know her and love her, is Ilona Maher. She is the star for the United States women's rugby team. She is incredible. She is funny. She is bright. She is a beast on the field. You should have seen their opening match. I mean, her arm is just like a denial and no thank you. You should see the footage. It's incredible. But she's also really speaking to sort of the vulnerability of being a female athlete and body positivity. Like the morning that the opening ceremonies were happening, she's like, hey, just a quick reminder, everybody is an Olympian body because everybody is strong. And, you know, just really amazing, wonderful, uplifting stuff. So if you are in need of another social follow, and aren't we all, it's Ilona Maher. It's ILONAMAHER. She is a delight.
My good call relates back to the whole show in the Olympics. Something we didn't talk about musically is the Olympic theme on NBC. It's got to be one of the best trumpet parts out there, and as a trumpeter, just like that, I get
Move
shivers
over, Mahler 5. We got the
every
Olympic
time I turn on that damn thing. Is it John Williams? I'm pretty sure.
I think so, yeah.
Yes, it's
Was
John.
it John Williams or Dvorak?
That is it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio Show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Get your voice heard. Find links to stuff we've talked about at the website, operaboxscore.com. And hey, that's also where you can put your money where our mouths are. Give back to the OBS using the Support the Team tab. can I just say, we got a $150 donation last week
Wow.
Thank you.
out of the
Thank
state of
you.
Michigan. So it happens, people. You too could be a donor. Hey, your announcer's Norm Waddell. Your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. Your audio editor, Weston Williams. For co-hosts, Matt Cummings and Ashley Hardgrave, I'm George Cedarquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera or about Celine Dion. Either way, Ashley and Matt are happy. Back with an all-new show next week. You're going to get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more polluted rivers. Join us.